Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. It's good to see you all, even if it's only virtually. Hopefully, we can resume these in person as soon as it becomes safe to do so. Obviously, we're doing it like this because we've all been in this very strange situation together for some time, and it's been very, very hard on a lot of us. I know at this point, we've lost more than 9,000 of our fellow New Jerseyans, and those are just the official statistics. We know that the true number is probably significantly higher than that. And I'm sure everybody on this call knows at least somebody who has been tragically affected by this pandemic. But there is some good news that we have, through an incredible collective effort, begun to bend the curve of this infection in New Jersey. I am somebody who follows facts and data, and I look at the data in New Jersey every single day to see how we're doing. And I've noticed that we probably hit our peak in around mid-April. It was a very scary moment because at that point, there was a day when we only had about 100 spare intensive care, critical care beds left in all the hospitals in the state of New Jersey. We were one or two outbreaks in a senior home away from completely breaking the system. And that would have been a catastrophe for all of us. That did not happen. And ever since then, the graph, the line has been moving in the right direction. We've gone from about 1,600 people in the state on ventilators to a little over 900 today. We're down to about 1,200 people in those critical and intensive care beds, down from about 2,000 at the height of this thing. Hospitalizations have been cut in half. And as a result, I think many of you saw the governor today took some additional measures to ease the restrictions on our activities, allowing businesses to do curbside pickups, for example, allowing more construction activities that support so many jobs in the state of New Jersey to resume. So that's all very good news. And it's important for all of us to remember that we got to this point, this fragile progress, not only because of the incredibly courageous efforts of our doctors and nurses and public health workers, although they deserve most of the credit, but also because each and every one of us, each and every one of you, followed the public health guidance and was willing to accept a lot of personal sacrifice to help those frontline medical workers do their jobs. And so we should all feel, as difficult as this has been, that we've done something very, very important and very, very good. The major cost for many of us, if we have not experienced the virus directly ourselves, the major cost has been economic. So many people have lost their jobs. Businesses have had to shut down. And so my focus and our focus in the House of Representatives has been on trying to deliver that economic relief so it's possible for people economically to go through this and to buy time for the public health response to work. We passed a bunch of bills already, including the CARES Act a few weeks ago, that were aimed at providing that relief. And on paper, I think were extremely good pieces of legislation. In practice, they've been more difficult to implement. We extended unemployment benefits. We created a small business lending program to enable our, particularly the smallest businesses in our communities, those mom and pop shops, to, even if they can't be open, to continue paying their employees. And we all know neither of those things has worked immediately as well as we had hoped. The unemployment system in New Jersey pretty much broke under the strain of millions of people applying at the same time. The small business loan program, we all read too many stories about the Los Angeles Lakers applying for and getting a loan, big steakhouse chains across the country, while mom and pop shops were told by banks, get in the back of the line. We're going to deal with our larger customers first. Made me extremely angry. But we have worked hard to try to fix those problems. We've passed additional legislation intended to do that. And I think there's evidence that it's working. More people, not everybody, but more people are getting the unemployment benefits that they are entitled to. And for the small businesses, there's clear evidence that, that we're doing better. At this point, for example, in the second round of this PPP, Paycheck Protection Program, we've had more than 90,000 small businesses in New Jersey receive their loans. In the first round, only about 33,000 New Jersey businesses got their loans. And the average size of the loans is down from over 200,000 per business to around 70,000 per business. So that tells you right there that we're getting the money, much more of the money, to truly small businesses in our communities. I've got my whole staff working on this right now because a lot of people needed help navigating this system. So my legislative staff in Washington, my district staff in Somerville, obviously all working from home, mostly now are full-time helping people constituent by constituent who have had trouble getting stuff that they're entitled to, and we've had some success. So we're not there yet, but I am absolutely determined that when we have made a promise to the American people, when we have made a promise to the constituents I represent, we are going to keep that promise, one person at a time, if necessary. So that's what we've done. Now we're on to the next stage. I'm sure many of you have read that this week we have introduced in the House, and we should pass on Friday, an even larger economic relief bill. The centerpiece of this bill, I'm happy to say, is exactly the thing that I have been fighting for the last 3 or 4 weeks. It is a significant relief package for our state and local governments. Why do we need this? Because every single municipality, every single county in New Jersey, whether big or small, is facing the same problem. Revenues are drying up because the economy has been locked down, and they still have to balance their budgets. They still need to pay, we still need them to pay the firefighters and police officers and school teachers, and to keep all of the programs that we depend on for small town life in New Jersey to carry on. They can't do it without some relief. A couple weeks ago, 54 of our local mayors and county freeholders, Republicans and Democrats, signed a letter urging the congressional leadership to provide this relief. They endorsed a bill that I was one of the leaders on in the House of Representatives to do just that. And we got that into the big HEROES Act, as we're calling it, that we're going to pass on Friday. Every single municipality, if that passes, every one of our municipalities, no matter how small, is going to get some relief. We are all going to see the benefit of that. So that's the big thing we're doing. We're also, we're helping out frontline essential workers who've been risking their lives for us with hazard pay. We've got more money for the public health system. We are doing something to help the post office survive this crisis. We've got language in there to try to make it safe for everybody to vote in the election in November, and a lot of other stuff. It's a very big and complicated bill. You've probably seen that Senator McConnell and the White House are saying, no way, we're not even going to take this up. That's not sustainable. Just today, the chairman of the Federal Reserve issued a very stark warning about the state of the economy and said that, you know, as expensive as this is, it is worth it if it can get us economic recovery and a stronger recovery and avoid a sustained economic depression. That is the price we will pay if we do not go big right now and help people when we still can. So that's what we're going to aim to do. In the next couple of weeks, I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on Senator McConnell, including from a lot of Republican as well as Democratic officials at the state and local level around the country saying, we need something. And you know what? He doesn't have to just pass our House bill. He should put forward his own ideas if he thinks that anything we've done in our bill is wrong. And then let's sit down and negotiate and find common ground that's going to help all of the American people and help to deliver for our district. There is plenty of common ground that we can find as long as we are willing to operate on that basis. I think the big obstacle is, there's this attitude among some, we hear it from the White House, that enough is enough. To hell with what the public health experts say. Don't listen to Dr. Fauci. Go back to work, go back to school. Some people might die, but whatever. We just have to get the country moving again. As if 1 or 2% of the people who catching this dying doesn't matter. And that 1 or 2% could very well be millions of people if we come out of this too early and we don't listen to the science. I'm not going to let that happen. I don't think our governor, our state leaders in New Jersey want to let that happen. We are going to work our hearts out to put in place the public health measures that will make it safe for us to go back to work, safe for us to go back to school, testing and contact tracing. We need to buy ourselves time to do that because unfortunately the federal government did not lead an effort to do that itself when it should have earlier this year. All I want for the American people, all I want for the people who I represent in the 7th District is what the president gives his staff every single day. In fact, I want even a little less than that because the White House staff get a coronavirus test every single day so that it is safe for President Trump to go to work, safe for Vice President Pence to go to work, safe for them to go to work. If that's what they're doing for themselves, then come on, we got to have testing and contact tracing for the American people before we tell them that go back to normal life and risk your life doing so. So that's where we are. That's where I am. I'm going to fight like hell to try to pass as much of this bill as we can, and to move on from there to additional legislation that's going to promote a real economic recovery in this country and get us back to something close to normal. So with that, I would love to hear any thoughts you guys have, take any questions on our coronavirus effort or any other issue that's on your mind. And we'll try to get to all the questions in the live discussion. If we don't, we'll find a way to get back to you afterwards. Thank you again. DeAndre, back to you.
Thank you, Tom. I know a few more of our neighbors have joined the conversation. So just to repeat, if there are any questions that you have, like the Congressman just stated, please use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. Please include the town you're from, your name, and some contact information. A phone number, email would be very helpful. So as he said, if we don't get to your question on our call, our staff can follow up afterward. And once we do go to the live question portion, I will be messaging you back, letting you know when you're up, when your turn is coming up, and just different instructions like that. And we'll go from there. So if you do ask a live question or submit a live question, please just be watching the chat feature for your next instruction. Tom, your first question. How can we, as tax-paying citizens, protest the federal government for the lack of unified federal testing plan?
Well, if you're upset about that, I share your anger. There are a lot of countries around the world that when they got their first coronavirus the first thing they did was to ramp up testing. South Korea is probably the most often cited because they got their first coronavirus case on the same day that we did. And the first thing they did, they had tests out there by late January. Our CDC didn't come up with a test until March, and it was a bad test. And the rest is very, very painful history. We are where we are with the economy, not because of the pandemic, but because we failed to test people for this disease in time. And, you know, we should be very, very angry about that. And then, you know, even once that became evident, the president did, for whatever reason, resist, and he continues to resist, calls from bipartisan members of Congress, medical experts, to use his power under a law called the Defense Production Act to compel private industry in this country to produce what is needed to make universal testing work in our country. You need not just the test kits, but the chemical reagents to run the tests. You need PPE, gloves and masks, etc. The federal government has placed some orders. It has delivered some of that to New Jersey. A bunch was just promised to Governor Murphy after he last met with President Trump, but they've never taken responsibility to create a national supply chain so that the states weren't competing against each other for the stuff. They prefer to dole it out a little bit here, a little bit there to whoever's being nice to them. And that's just no way to run a country in the middle of a crisis. So how do we protest it? Well, you know, I don't want to get too political here, but we are all citizens of this country. We all have a right to choose leaders who are going to put the interests of the American people ahead of their own personal interest, leaders who are willing to take responsibility every day that they go to work rather than trying to blame others. And we need to remember that when we choose our leaders. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Our next question: what will happen to the state if we don't receive the multi-billion-dollar bailout request that Governor Murphy requested?
So I wouldn't call it a bailout, because bailout suggests that we did something wrong and now we need to be bailed out. You know, a bunch of people are critical of how New Jersey has run its state finances, and I get that over the years, but that's not what this is about. This is not about making up for any past fiscal mistakes, either in the Murphy or the Chris Christie administration. This is about paying for direct expenses related to the coronavirus, expenses that the state and local governments have incurred to protect people, to protect our lives. And number two, making up for revenues that are lost, again, directly because of the coronavirus, because businesses are shut down and they're not paying taxes. That's all we're talking about. And because the state and our localities have to balance their budget, they have no recourse other than borrowing the money or the federal relief that we are trying to provide. And again, this is bipartisan in the state of New Jersey. Nobody, Republican mayors and freeholders, Democratic mayors and freeholders, all pretty much agree, at least in our congressional district. So what will happen? We're going to have to lay off a lot of people at the local and county level. I would expect it will hit our schools very, very hard. I expect some very tough choices will have to be made with regard to police and fire departments, whether that's laying off people or deferring purchases of equipment. I expect that a lot of things that may not seem as essential as, say, having a fire or police department will be on the chopping block. You know, golf courses, community golf courses and campgrounds and summer programs for kids and community pools. Maybe we can live without those things, but you know, this is small town life in New Jersey, and I don't I think it's demoralizing when all of those things go by the wayside. So I don't want to see that happen. I think it would be horrible for our quality of life and for our economy if it were to happen. Not only that, but anybody who's laid off, who's a state or local employee, guess what they're going to do? They're going to apply for unemployment. And guess who pays for that? We do. So I'd rather spend the money to keep them employed, working for us. That's what this is about. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Our first live question comes from Fred from Millington. Fred, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Fred.
Hi, thank you for hosting this. This is
Sure.
this is great. My question is, as a gig worker, I have applied for unemployment and was declined as was expected,
Right.
and did receive something in the mail. I went back in, followed the directions, and bottom line, I'm asked to call. Trying to call that number, it's impossible to get through. Every day, calling. Seems like the phones are opened up at about 20 to 8 in the morning, and about 19 to 8 in the morning, you can't get through. You just can't get through. Call tomorrow, call the next business day, rinse, repeat, over and over again. What to do? What's the next step? Is it to wait for them to contact me? Because trying to call that number just does not work.
Yeah. So look, if I can tell you, if you're confident that you're entitled to this based on your situation, then yes, if you wait, they are going to get back to you, and you're going to get what has been promised. But I can understand why that would not be very satisfying, and why you might be feeling even greater anxiety as a result. So you could call another number. You could call our office, or actually just leave your information in the chat at the end of this Zoom call, and someone in our team will get back to you. The only hesitation I have is that we now have about 1,500 cases that my staff is working on, and they're working absolutely around the clock. And we've had, we can't make promises, obviously, but we have had some success in getting a return phone call to you, to our constituents from the state unemployment agency. So if you're feeling anxious, please don't hesitate to avail yourself of that. And again, the way to do that would just be to leave your information in the chat after the call. The good news is, again, if you qualify for the assistance, it will be backdated to the point at which you qualified. So even if you're waiting longer than you should, that's not going to affect the amount of relief that you get.
Right. Okay. Appreciate it. Appreciate the help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Our next question comes from Mary Lynn from Long Valley. Mary Lynn, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thanks for taking my question / comment. So on Monday, I just wanted to listen to the weather on 101.5. I was coming back from a hike, and I happened to hear this idiot on 101.5, our radio station in New Jersey. And essentially, Bill Spadia is wholeheartedly encouraging people to go into grocery stores without a mask, and telling people that, if the manager asks you to put a mask on, tell them to call the police. So I filed a complaint against him with the FCC. I know there's freedom of speech, but this is a man who controls the airwaves for 2 or 3 hours a day on our biggest, loudest radio station. So the question is, when we have this kind of influence, how do we get people to abide by you know, social distancing. He was basically calling people wimps if they isolate. He said, you know, herd immunity, just go out there, just start living your life and stop being a wimp.
Yeah.
I don't know. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I got some thoughts on that, as you can imagine. First of all, wearing a mask is not about protecting yourself. It's about protecting other people. When you're wearing a mask, you're doing exactly what our heroes in the hospitals do every single day. When you're wearing a mask, you're doing exactly what our heroes in our armed forces sign up to do every single day, to protect others. And when you follow that idiotic advice, you're not just endangering yourself. You may not be endangering yourself at all, but you are endangering other people. You have a right to say idiotic things in this country. Anybody can be an idiot. That's a constitutionally guaranteed right. You do not have a right to endanger the health and the lives of other people. That is absolutely wrong. And here's the good news. The vast majority of us are not listening to the idiots. If you look at the polls, about the last poll I saw said about 66% of the people in New Jersey think that we are opening the economy at just about the right pace, and about 19% think we're moving too fast. So that's like over 80%, 85% who believe that we're either doing the right thing or we should be even more cautious than we are today. And if you look around, the vast majority of people in this state and in this country are doing the right thing, not because anyone has a gun to their heads, not because the police are going to come, but because they are smart, decent, compassionate people. And they're willing to make a personal sacrifice to help others, despite what some idiot on the radio may be saying. So we're going to be okay, despite the existence of people like that.
Okay, hope so.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Sue. Sue, can you hear us?
I can. Yep. Yeah, my question is with the testing that's being done. I know there's various tests that are available, and just wondering how do we know how accurate they are? I've been hearing that some tests are not really accurate at all. There's lots of false negatives and false positives, and I guess my concern too is if we do a lot of testing, is there going to be a false sense of security if it's not accurate, and how do we really know how accurate these various tests are or being done correctly?
So no test is 100% accurate ever. The diagnostic tests are pretty accurate. The diagnostic tests are the ones that tell you, do you have the virus right now? Are you infectious? And the vast majority of people who are positive will test positive on those tests. The greater problem right now, just hopefully for now, hopefully it gets better, is with the serology tests, the antibody tests, excuse me, which are meant to show whether you have had coronavirus and built up antibodies that make you potentially immune to the disease. And there, if you do the math, the false positive problem becomes a very serious problem, because only, I'll run through it for you. I'll run through it for you and see if you can follow along. If you imagine you have 1,000 people taking the antibody test, and 100 of them, in fact, have had coronavirus. They've been exposed to it. So 900 haven't, 100 have. And let's say there's a 5% error rate. It's 95% accurate, which sounds pretty good. Well, that means of the 100 who should test positive, 95 will test positive, right? That's 95 true positives right there. But then you've got the 900 who don't have the antibody, but 5% of them will also test positive. 5% of 900 is 45. And so what you end up with is 90 true positives and 45 false positives. And those 45 go out in the world thinking that they can't get the disease or infect anybody. That's a significant share of the positives are false. So that's where I think we have to be a little bit cautious. I know a lot of people are taking these antibody tests. I'm not saying don't do it, but just be very wary of the fact that if you test positive, which in that case is good, right? It's kind of what you want, that it shouldn't be quite as reassuring as some people say it is. We also, by the way, don't know how long the immunity lasts or how strong it is. So I would say, you know, we're good on the diagnostic, but got to be a little more cautious on the immunity test.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. Just a reminder, if you would like to ask a live question during the conversation today, please just use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. Please include your name, the town you're from, and contact information so we can follow up if we don't get to your question on the call or if there's additional follow-up. Our next question comes from Bernadine and Alan. Can you hear us? Bernadine,
okay.
there we go.
You got us?
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we're
Yeah.
here. I'm curious as to how long after you get your initial unemployment does the extra $600 kick in? Any idea, or does it come automatic? Do you have to do
automatic? It comes
is
automatic. It kicks in. The start date, I think, is the last week in March. If I'm incorrect about that, my staff will jump in and chide me, but I think that's right. So again, let's say you start getting it now, it would be backdated to that point. And the bill that we just introduced in the House would extend that benefit through January.
Oh, thank goodness.
Okay, but you wanted to know how long you wait after you get your regular unemployment?
Yeah, I mean, it's been 8 weeks or whatever.
Have you started to get your regular unemployment?
Yeah, I've
They
gotten
just
my
approved, yeah.
regular
Okay.
unemployment.
So look, all I can say, I can't tell you when, right? Because, you know, the state does run the unemployment system. We talk to them every day. We're trying to move these cases along. But what they tell us is that they've started to process the enhanced benefit. So that means some people probably have gotten it, but probably most people have not. But you will.
Okay,
Right? The fact that you already started getting the regular means that you're in the system, you're
right,
you're
okay.
good. It's just a matter of time, and it will be back. Of
Thank you. I appreciate that.
course, of course.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you both. Our next question comes from Marie. Marie, can you hear us?
Very good. Thank you so very much. Thank you for fighting for all of our best interests, Representative.
Thank you, Marie.
As an elementary educator, I'm deeply concerned for my students who do not have access to technology in light of the need for distance learning, both now and in the imminent future. Can federal funds to municipalities be used to address the disparity that exists for these students?
If we can get federal funds to municipalities, which is what we're fighting for in this bill, the answer is yes. I think that would clearly count as a coronavirus-related expense. We've sent our kids home.
Yes.
And they are entitled to receive an education. Therefore, it's a necessary expense related to the coronavirus crisis. So absolutely. The problem is we haven't been able to get assistance to our municipalities yet. We have gotten some to the state of New Jersey. So theoretically, the state could help with that, but it's, you know, the burdens on our state right now are enormous.
Of course.
And the fiscal crisis it's facing is enormous. That's why we're trying to pass this bill. I've had some conversations with Verizon about this to try to get our corporate community to step up a little bit more and help out kids in New Jersey who fall through the cracks. You know,
It is.
we have,
Yeah.
even in some of our wealthier communities, there are kids who will fall through the cracks and they don't have the tech that they need. So yeah, really, really important. By the way, we're also in this bill, there's a big investment in broadband access for parts of our country that don't yet have it.
Right.
We don't think that's a problem. A lot of people don't think that's a problem in New Jersey, and it's not in most of our state, but it actually is in
Yes.
parts of it. I represent part of Warren County around Phillipsburg, where it's still a very big problem.
Sure.
So,
And way up north here in Butler, it is
Yeah.
surely a problem.
Yeah.
You know, I have 17 students, and 4 of whom just have no access.
what school?
In Aaron Decker School, Butler, New Jersey.
Okay. Yeah.
And
Thank you so much.
they just don't have access. So thank you. Thank you for fighting for us.
Thank you. Thanks for raising that.
Thank you both. I will read the next question, Tom, for you. Are there any updates regarding what's happening with funding for the U.S. Postal Service, especially with mailing prescriptions and different supplies, including PPE?
The Postal Service, did you say?
Correct. Any updates regarding funding for the Postal Service?
So we include emergency funding for the Postal Service in the bill that we just introduced. We tried once before in the CARES Act, and the Senate, Leader McConnell refused to consider it. They argued that it was not related to the coronavirus crisis. I beg to differ. I think most Americans would beg to differ. We need the post office today more than ever before for some of the reasons the questioner mentioned, and because all of us are much more dependent on deliveries because we're staying at home. It's pretty basic and obvious. The post office is having financial difficulties, and it's important to remember this is not because the post office is badly run, it's losing money. It's actually making money on its delivery service, on its basic function. The reason it's having financial difficulties is because about 15 years ago, Congress saddled it with a requirement to prepay the pensions of, pre-fund the pensions of their employees about 50 years in advance. And as anyone might have predicted, that is a huge burden that has led to a fiscal crisis, and we want to help. I can't imagine that the Senate will continue to resist this. This is not a partisan issue when it comes to the American people. In fact, if anything, you know, I think the typical person who really has depended on the post office in America and who truly appreciates it is not a millennial living in Brooklyn or Berkeley, California, right? These are folks from all over the country, particularly rural America, who depend on this. And I think they've been telling their senators and their representatives, come on, figure out a way to make sure that the post office can survive. And so I'm hoping that this is something that we will be negotiating on and with the Senate, and that it'll be a negotiation in good faith. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Another question that's come up a few times. I know you addressed this a little bit in your opening remarks, but will there be mail-in voting available in November?
Yeah, there sure will be in New Jersey, because we already guarantee that right to anybody in New Jersey who asks for it. And in fact, we're going to have a primary in New Jersey delayed to July that I'm guessing, I believe, based on conversations with the governor, will be mostly mail voting. I think there will still be ways to vote in person, but I think most of us will likely be voting by mail in the primary. So we have this right in New Jersey. We need to build up our system in the expectation that more people than ever before will be voting by mail in November to stay safe. The real issue for me is other states that do not grant this right to all of their citizens. There are still over a dozen states that don't allow it for everybody. In our bill, we have a provision that mandates early voting and vote by mail in every state as a safety precaution and provides some money to help the states that still need to make the transition to do it in time. We should never, ever, ever again have to go through what the people of Wisconsin went through a few weeks ago when they were forced to choose between their right to vote and their right to life. It should never happen in America. And this should not be a partisan issue. It's about everybody, Republicans, Democrats, Independents. Everyone should have a right to vote safely.
Thank you, Tom. Our next live question comes from Annie from Roxbury. Can you hear us?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Congressman Malinowski. My question is regarding the House bill that you referenced earlier in the call and you've referenced a few times. Obviously, there's going to be changes to it by the time it gets to the Senate. Mm-hmm. What changes do you expect to be the ones that can be compromised on? The president is giving his briefing as this is going on and has said that the House bill as it stands is dead on arrival, which is not shocking that he would say that. Yeah. But what are the lines in the sand for you? Thank you.
Sure. I mean, I want to get the state and local relief. That's huge for me. I want to get the additional money for testing and contact tracing because we cannot do what President Trump wants to do and reopen the economy. We all want to do. Reopen the economy safely without a really significant testing and contact tracing effort. And since he said he doesn't want to lead that himself, we need help for the states to be able to do it ourselves. So those are two really, really big and important things. As I mentioned, I think we'll get something on the post office. I think we'll get something on voting. My guess is Republicans in the Senate will fight hard to not have a mandate on states to allow vote by mail, and we'll have an argument about that. But at least we want to get some more resources to help states that want to do the right thing to do it. What else do they want? Well, we've heard from Senator McConnell that his number one demand is that we give businesses immunity from lawsuits for any case that might arise because of the coronavirus crisis. And I got to say, I'm not a litigious person. I don't believe in solving every problem by taking people to court, but I'm not sure if I love the idea of telling a meatpacking plant that they can force their poorly paid workers to go to work without adequate protective equipment and not face any liability for that. I don't think that sends the right message right now, and I don't understand why that is his number one priority when so many people are suffering. And then we've heard, I think, from the administration, they want to cut the capital gains tax. Well, you know what? I want to restore the SALT deduction, which, by the way, is in the bill. I should have mentioned that. There's so much in it. We got a 2-year repeal of the $10,000 SALT cap in this bill. I'd like to have that before we have cuts to the capital gains tax. So those are the kinds of things we're going to be arguing about. You asked about compromise, and by definition, when you compromise, you accept something you don't like. And I'm not going to like that, but by definition, but we have to do it because we have one party that controls the House and another party that controls the Senate. At the end of the day, my job is to fight like hell for all the stuff that I think we need for our country and for our district. and to be willing to accept something that is less than 100% and that might include a few things the other side wants that I don't love, if on balance, it leaves us better off. So, you know, all I want from them is let's sit down and negotiate. Don't say what Senator McConnell said yesterday. He said something like, we just don't feel a sense of urgency at this time to do anything. We got.
Thank you.
I feel urgency. Thank you, Ani.
Yeah, thank you.
Our next question comes from Danny. Danny, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can. Hi, Tom. Hope you're doing well. I was just wondering what you think, I guess, school will look like in the fall, if there will be school at all, and what do you think has to be seen in order for in-person school to happen? And what do you think, you know, will be different in schools?
Yeah. Good question. How are you doing, by the way, with the distance learning? Is it working out?
Yeah, I'm good. I have my AP US history test Friday, so.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, but overall it's been going pretty well. I mean,
predict your score.
I'm
Call
hoping
it right
for
here.
at least a 4. I'm hoping for at least a 4. Hopefully I can get a 5.
Okay, we're going to hold you to that.
All right, deal.
So look, I hope very much, all of us hope that we can go back to in-person schooling in September. My answer to all these questions that begin with when can we or will we by this date is to say that the right question is, what must we do now so that it is safe for you to do that thing that you want to do, whether it's go to the beach or go shopping or go back to work or go back to school, right? Because, you know, eventually it's going to happen. We can't just stay at home forever. Nobody can tolerate this for too much longer. So when it happens, is it going to be safe? And that's why I go back to really investing in testing and contact tracing and isolation, which means that, you know, you ought to be able to get a test. Your teachers ought to be able to get a test. And if you should test positive, then we'll tell you, sorry, you've got to stay home for 2 or 3 weeks or whatever the recommended amount of time is. And we'll figure out who your contacts were in the time when you were infected. And then those folks will have to get a test too. And meanwhile, everybody else should be able to go back because they've tested negative, right? That makes sense. So that's what we're working really, really hard to try to get done. Governor Murphy announced his testing plan yesterday, and I've been pushing him actually to be even more ambitious with that testing and contact tracing. And of course, we're trying to get the resources that the state needs and our local governments need to do this. When you do go back, it's probably not going to be exactly the same. You know, there may be fewer large gatherings. There may be situations where you're advised to wear a mask. You know, maybe people sitting a little bit further apart. I don't know. It'll be up to your school board to figure that out with good advice from experts. And honestly, I think the students should take part in making those decisions too, and in advising your teachers and your school administration what would work best for you. Because you guys know, I mean, you guys know the science as well as I do, right? And I think you guys should be very much part of thinking up creative ways to do this that are safe.
Yeah.
Sure. Thanks.
Thanks.
Our next question comes from Sue. Sue, can you hear us?
I can. I'm sorry to have to do more than one, but I didn't necessarily need this addressed on the call, but I throw it out there. I guess, again, just trying to grapple and wrap my head around all of this and all these unknowns that are still out there. And I know there's been talk of the HR 6666, the TRACE Act, and just kind of what your knowledge and thoughts are on that at the moment. I know that there are a lot of people that are concerned about a path that this may take us down with, continued surveillance and infringement on freedoms, and getting back to this testing, and that I guess my fear of our over-reliance on testing, knowing that it's not always completely accurate, and are we setting ourselves up for a false sense of security? And we seem to be putting all our eggs in kind of a testing basket and finding out who has it, versus I'm not hearing a lot of talk on what do we do to build our immune system? How do we stay healthier to combat this?
Yeah.
Because I know this is probably not a one and done. There's viruses and bacteria, and how are we going to handle the next wave of whether it's this or something else?
Yeah.
And do it in a way that can be beneficial and not make us all stay home all the time.
Yeah, of course.
Forever.
So it's not, I emphasize testing and contact tracing because it's an important part of the solution that we don't have enough of yet. So, that's where a lot of the effort and resources has to go. But obviously it's not the only thing. We've invested a lot of money and effort, as I hope you know, in trying to come up with effective treatments, because we don't have that yet. It would make a very big difference if we knew that somebody who had coronavirus could be quickly and effectively treated with an antiviral medicine. That would change our calculations on opening things up as well, right? And then, of course, we're working very, very hard to develop a vaccine. And New Jersey is home to many of the great American companies that are at the forefront of that effort. In the very first bill we passed, actually, way back at the start of this, we provided several $billions to help jumpstart the research and development of a vaccine in partnership with our pharmaceutical companies. And a lot of other countries are doing the same thing. And then, yes, of course, we should all try to be healthy. You don't need an elected official to be telling you how to do that. Our job is to try to move the resources to build the public health response that everybody needs to get out of this safely. And then I am certainly thinking about how do we better prepare for the next global pandemic. I had a bipartisan bill that I introduced about 3 weeks ago that tries to fix the problems with our national stockpile of protective equipment. One reason why we're in this mess, we didn't have enough masks and gloves and gowns and ventilators. Too many of those things are produced outside the United States, including in China. So I put in a bill that basically says at the beginning of every year, the Department of Health and Human Services needs to make an assessment. How much do we have? How much do we actually need in every single category to be prepared for a major global pandemic? And then how much is that going to cost to get to where we need to be? And then all that information is delivered to the American people and to the Congress without being filtered through the usual political budget process in Washington, so that we know this is what we need to do. And Congress is on the spot. Do you fund that or not? I think we would fund it. So anyway, that bill was included in the larger bill we're going to pass on Friday, and hopefully would stay in whatever goes to the president, because it did have bipartisan support. So a lot of us are thinking about how do you learn the lessons of this and do things better the next time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both. I will turn it back over to you, Tom, for closing remarks.
Of course, thank you all for a really, really good discussion. I know there's a lot of anxiety out there, and a lot of us have taken some really bad hits over the last few weeks. But I do want to come back to the point that we are making some progress. And it's thanks in part to some good leadership in the state and a lot of heroic people working on the front lines. But it's also in large part due to what all of us are doing personally to do our part to make things better. This is, in my view, the most extraordinary and inspiring collective effort against a common enemy that the American people have mounted probably since the Second World War. We've saved a lot of lives. I know we've lost a lot of lives, but we've also saved a lot of lives in doing this. And we just have to have the discipline to keep on doing it, to keep on following the strategy that was laid out by our state government, even the strategy that was publicly put out by the Trump administration, which was not bad. Stick to it. And if we do that, we will have not just an economic recovery, but I think a very strong economic recovery coming out of this. And then, as we were just saying, let's learn the lessons and apply them so that we're better prepared the next time. I'm going to keep on fighting really, really hard for those things. I'm going to stay in contact with all of you as soon as possible. I'll be doing these events live, but in the meantime, we'll stay in touch virtually. And I want to hear from anybody who has a concern or who needs help from me and my team in making sure that we keep our promises to you. So with that, thank you again for spending a little time with me this evening. Please, everybody, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay in touch.